I remember when I was a little boy, I was 7 years old, and I believed that my dad was the tallest man in the world. Now, my dad was only 5'10", 180 centimetres. He was not a tall man at all. But I believed for some reason that he was the tallest man in the world. And I remember the day very clearly, vividly, when I saw someone who was taller than my dad. I don't know where I got this idea in my head. And I remember that night, I still remember being in bed as a little 7-year-old, crying my eyes out. I can just imagine, I can just see it right now. I remember it so well, crying my eyes out that my dad was not the tallest man in the world. Gee, we have some crazy thoughts when we're young, don't we? Even now we can have some thoughts that are just so wrong and incorrect, but we put a lot of meaning upon them, don't we? When I was young and learning to read, the way we did it at our school is in the back of a reading book, the teacher would set you a certain number of pages to read. And what you would do is you would read those pages, and there was a little card in the back of the book, and then your parent or your brother and older brother and sisters or your grandparents would sign it to say that you'd done the reading for the day. Well, my mum had this very small and neat signature. But my dad, on the other hand, he had this big flowery signature. And Mum listened to my reading most of the time. Well, one day my dad decided that he would listen to my reading. And he listened to it, and then he got out the card, and Dad did this giant flowery signature. And what he did was he went outside the lines. Well, that was just terrible to me. I remember crying and screaming that I was going to go to school tomorrow and I was going to be in trouble because my dad had scribbled in the back of my reading book. And I remember being in year 2 and I was petrified to go to school the next day because Dad was going to Dad had scribbled in my reading book. Well, the interesting thing is I remember when I was telling Dad this, he couldn't stop laughing. He thought it was hilarious, and I did not appreciate the fact that he was laughing. Well, over the years and in time, I actually came to understand that I was actually in the wrong and that Dad was in the right, and that it actually was quite funny that I thought my dad had scribbled in the book and he was just signing his signature, and his signature's a big signature. Well, over the years we laughed about it so many times, how Dad had done that. And over time, through situations like that, both the good and the difficult, Dad and I grew in this relationship where we deeply fell in love with each other. And he'd always loved me from the day I was born. But I began to appreciate him in a richer and richer and richer way all of the time. Well, it's a little bit like, how do you grow in your relationship with God? Now, for those of us who've been doing the church thing for a long time, we know that it's about commitment and being there and all of that type of stuff. And if we're not careful, for many of us who've walked the journey of faith for a long period of time, being committed to God can become something that is dry and you have to do, and you know what you have to do. And as a matter of fact, you can even teach other people how to do it. And yet it can be this thing where your relationship with God shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, even though you can teach someone else what they meant to do. See, we're called to have this relationship with God where we remain vibrant, where that relationship remains tender. And how does that relationship remain tender? It stays tender through creating time to have God as part of your life. But not just I have to pray today and so I'm going to get it done. But to have that attitude and kind of relationship which says, God, I choose you and I want you to be fresh with you. It's to invite God into that place of intimacy where we share the intimate details of our life and not the needs of our life. One of the difficulties with only putting our needs before God and saying, God, give me this, and God, do that, and God, provide this, is that in time we only see God as somehow someone who can distribute stuff to us. Prayer enables us to discover God within our life, and it allows us to discover God in our life and to develop this friendship that's rich. Because as we know, friendship is not just about asking, it's about being together, it's about celebration, it's about the good times, the difficult times, about the wonderful times, and it's about joy. And all of that is experienced in prayer. You don't become rich in your relationship with God if you are not consistent at prayer. Make a decision today that you will become a disciplined person of prayer. And not just a prayer because you live in a place where every day you pray and there's certain hours to pray, and so you do that. Or because someone told you have to, but rather that you make a choice for a relationship where you share everything and you allow God to touch the center of your heart. It's easier said than done, but it can be done.